This morning, I was dead asleep, deep, heavy kind of sleep you only get after chopping firewood for half the afternoon and falling asleep with a book on your chest, when I woke to the unmistakable sound of destruction. A loud crack, followed by a pop, then the shudder of something giving way. For a split second, I thought a bear had charged through the wall. Or maybe a tree had finally lost its battle with the wind and crashed into the cabin. I jolted upright, heart pounding and still half in a dream, only to find a chunk of my living room wall completely missing. Gone. Like someone had taken a crowbar and a bad attitude to my house in the middle of broad daylight. And standing there in the gaping hole were 3 people. Not paramedics, not forest rangers. No, these were the kind of folks that make your stomach drop before they even open their mouths, HOA board members. All 3 were dressed like they were headed to a courtroom instead of the woods, holding clipboards and manila folders so thick you could knock out a raccoon with them. They had the kind of expressions you see on customs officers when they think you've smuggled in an orange. Suspicious. Self-righteous. One of them, a wiry man with a neatly trimmed mustache and shoes too polished for a dirt road, stepped forward and said with all the authority of a man who's never built anything in his life, "Sir, you're in violation of Emergency Code 12.3. Emergency Code 12.3? I hadn't even had my coffee yet. And somehow, within 5 minutes of being awake, I was being evicted from a home I'd built with my own 2 hands. Now, you're probably wondering what I did to piss them off that bad. The answer? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I didn't throw wild parties. I didn't dig a moat. I didn't install giant flamingos or build a treehouse in protest. I followed every rule. Got every permit. This cabin, nestled in the shadow of Pine Ridge, had full county approval. 8 years ago, I came here to escape exactly this sort of bureaucratic nonsense. After burning out on city politics and neighborly micromanagement, I moved to Montana for peace. Solitude. Space. A view of the mountains and the quiet that comes with not hearing leaf blowers every Sunday. And for a while, I had exactly that. Mornings with hot coffee and birdsong. Evenings walking the trail with Copper, my golden retriever, who knew the path better than I did. The wind through the pines, the crackle of the fire pit, the occasional deer grazing beyond the clearing, life was good. Honest. And quiet. Until she showed up. Her name was Mara Jensen. Mid-50s, with the posture of someone permanently disappointed in the world and a wardrobe full of cardigans too stiff for Montana weather. She marched up to my door like she was running for mayor, clipboard in hand and a smile that barely stretched past her teeth. "Just making sure your cabin meets community standards, Mr. Moore," she said. That was the first time I met her. And I knew, instantly, that she'd be a problem. 6 months later, I got the first letter. Violation, exterior color, non-compliant. I remember standing on my porch with Copper sniffing at my boots as I opened it. According to the letter, my cabin's natural pine stain didn't fit the HOA's approved palette of soft beige, warm stone, or muted coastal gray. Coastal gray? We're in the Rockies, not Cape Cod. The house was made of literal pine wood. What did they want me to do? Paint it? At first, I laughed. Thought it was a joke. But then the fines started rolling in. First $50. Then $100. Then $500. Every week, a new notice. I tried to be civil. Emailed Mara the original building permits. Attached scans of county documentation proving I was beyond the HOA's building envelope. I even cited code, chapter and verse. She replied with a new violation, unapproved landscaping. Landscaping? I hadn't landscaped anything. The flowers growing along the trail were wild. Montana's own handiwork. Next came the fire pit complaint, even though the county had inspected and cleared it 2 years prior. I started saving everything, emails, letters, even voicemails. Something about it didn't feel random. It felt targeted. Personal. Like they weren't enforcing rules, they were trying to push me out. And then I noticed something strange. One of the newer violation notices had a tiny logo in the bottom right corner. Mid-State Community Consulting. Never heard of them. The print was small, almost like they didn't want me to notice it. I searched them online. One-page website. No contact info. No staff directory. Looked like it had been thrown together in an afternoon by someone who didn't want to be found. That night, I sat on my porch and stared at the trees, the dark line of the ridge against the stars, wondering why an HOA needed a private consulting firm to tell me my porch was the wrong shade of brown. Then came the SUV. White, unmarked, and parked across the road like it was just passing through. Every time I stepped out, it pulled away. Next came a new camera mounted on the utility pole. No utility company tag. No label. Pointed directly at my porch. It didn't belong to the power company, I checked. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But Copper started acting different. Tense. Growling near the property line, barking at corners that were usually quiet. He's the mellow type, that dog. Doesn't get riled easy. So when he did, I took notice. I started leaving lamps on through the night, not because I was scared, but because I felt watched. Nights became long. I'd sit in the dark, behind drawn curtains, just listening. Watching. Waiting for something I couldn't quite name. A knock. A crash. Anything. Then came the final letter. Stamped in red ink. Bold, capitalized, dramatic. Final notice, structural deficiencies. Order of inspection. What deficiencies? I'd built that wall myself. With care. With code. And the inspection? I hadn't requested one. No contact name. No scheduling details. Just a threat at the bottom. Failure to comply will result in enforcement proceedings. Enforcement. Like I was a criminal. I called the county. No such inspection order existed. That's when the weight in my chest became something I couldn't shake. I walked the perimeter of the cabin that night with a flashlight and Copper at my side. Checked locks. Reread old letters. Replayed voicemails. I was tired, but not scared. Tense, but not broken. I stared at the wall that I built, board by board, and swore, silently, it wouldn't be taken from me. Not without a fight. I needed answers. I needed help. And just like that, it came. Thursday morning. Middle of nowhere. I was making coffee when there was a knock on the door. No delivery truck. No neighbor. I opened it cautiously, and there he was. A man with a travel bag slung over his shoulder, worn jeans, and a grin I hadn't seen since we were 22. Tyler Beck. College buddy. Engineering lab partner. The guy who once convinced me to build a backyard trebuchet, and nearly got us both banned from campus. Eric, he said. Still wearing flannel, I see. I stared. Tyler? What the hell? He laughed. Got your address off the alumni site. Hope that's not too weird. I didn't answer right away. Depends. You here as a friend, or something else? He smirked. Little bit of both. We sat on the porch for a while, not saying much. Tyler had that way about him, comfortable silence. Copper curled at his feet like they'd known each other forever. Finally, I asked, so, you just happened to be driving through Montana? Tyler leaned back and pulled a thick folder from his bag. Tabs, color-coded notes, satellite images. My stomach turned. I've been working a case, he said. And your name came up. Those are not words you want to hear from someone who investigates land disputes for a living. He laid out the paperwork. A development company from Arizona had been quietly buying up land across several states. Pine Ridge was next on the list. And right in the middle of their proposed scenic corridor? My land. He didn't need to say it. I saw the red circle on the satellite photo. Tyler flipped the page. And your HOA president, Mara Jensen? She's under contract with them. Officially, she's a community liaison. Unofficially, she's their bulldozer. Every fine. Every violation. Every final notice. It wasn't enforcement. It was eviction by design. And now, I had proof. Tyler had already filed a public records request before he even stepped onto my porch, and what he found inside those documents damn near knocked the wind out of me. Sitting across my kitchen table, lit only by a dusty overhead bulb and the flicker of the wood stove behind us, he slid the folder open. Take a look, he said quietly, like we were inside a crime scene and didn't want to disturb the ghosts. There it was, clear as day. Mara Jensen's name. Not just mentioned. Signed. Her signature appeared on a memo from Midstate Community Consulting, stamped and dated, listing targeted parcels for immediate compliance review. My address sat comfortably at the very top, marked with a small red star. This wasn't some blanket policy, Tyler said. They built a hit list. There were emails, too. Dozens of them. Some encrypted behind barely functioning security protocols, others sent carelessly, like the sender thought no one would ever bother to dig them up. One email from a development executive read, "If we can push more off that land, Ridgeview opens up." I had to read that line 3 times before it really sank in. Ridgeview. That's what this was all about. Not safety codes, not aesthetics. It was about money. Profit. The view from my porch was the only thing standing between them and a multimillion-dollar resort scheme. My land wasn't an eyesore, it was a damn obstacle. My hands were trembling. Tyler noticed. He didn't say anything. Just reached over and slid a tumbler across the table, half full of something dark and smoky. "You'll want that drink," he said. "Because what we're about to do doesn't leave room for mistakes." That night, we made our first move. Tyler had brought a long-range directional audio recorder. Military surplus tech, legal under Montana's one-party consent laws. He knew the rules to the letter. He'd used this kind of gear during civil investigations before. "It can pick up a conversation through a double-pane window at 40 yards, he said, brushing pine needles off the device before tucking it behind the rock wall across from the HOA office. "We'll let it run overnight," he said. "And check the feed in the morning." I nodded, my chest tight with something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. I'd come out here to escape bureaucracy, politics, the noise of the world. But now I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't a guy getting bullied. I was part of a counteroffensive. The HOA didn't just escalate, they went corporate. The letters turned into invoices, and the invoices started reading like eviction orders. A new emergency structural reevaluation showed up on my doorstep, backdated by nearly 2 weeks. It was riddled with ominous language and legalese meant to intimidate: hazard, enforcement, immediate action required. The so-called inspector? A name neither of us recognized. But we'd seen the pattern before. No license. No credentials. No paper trail. Just a name on a clipboard and enough gold to knock on a man's door and question his foundation. Meanwhile, bird boxes had appeared in the trees, at least 3 of them, brand new, identical, and far too shiny for something meant to attract finches. Tyler took one look and said, "Those aren't for birds." They were surveillance. Wide-angle lenses tucked into fake nesting holes, aimed at my porch, my driveway, and my front door. Watching. Recording. Mara wasn't just doubling down. She was rewriting the narrative. And the worst part? It was starting to work. Neighbors I'd known for years began avoiding eye contact. One woman I used to hike with crossed the street when she saw me at the general store. A guy I'd helped shovel out of a ditch last winter suddenly forgot my name. The whisper campaign had begun. Then came the twist. That night, we listened to the first set of audio from the recorder. Tyler queued up the file on his laptop. We leaned in. Static. Wind. Then footsteps. Voices. Mara's voice cut through it all, sharp, clipped, smug. "Once we clear the Moore property," she said, "the resort project can move forward. That cabin is the only thing blocking the scenic view." I felt the blood drain from my face. She said it. Out loud. With conviction. Like it was a punchline to a private joke. Tyler hit pause. "That's your smoking gun right there," he said. I didn't respond right away. Just stared at the speaker, my hands curled into fists on the table. Not fear. Not even shock. Just a steady, silent fury. So it was real. Every letter. Every camera. Every visit. It was a campaign. A hit job. "They're not just pushing," I said. "They're targeting." Tyler nodded. "And now we push back." I didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, out of adrenaline. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw bulldozers chewing up tree roots. I saw Mara's smug smile fade into the mist beyond the ridge line. I sat on the floor, Copper's head in my lap, going over the documents in my head. Again and again. Do I go public? Call the county? File a lawsuit? "Not yet," Tyler said. "We need more. Let her keep digging. If we go too early, they'll lawyer up and bury everything." The next morning, I sent a polite but pointed email to the HOA, requesting a copy of the structural inspection report. I said the county zoning board and quoted the relevant state statute. All emergency assessments must be independently verified within 10 days of notice. I hit send and waited. An hour later, I got a reply. "Report pending finalization." Tyler laughed. Translation? "They're scrambling." Later that day, we caught Mara pacing outside the HOA building on our trail cam. Phone pressed to her ear. Face pale. Tyler zoomed in. She knows something's off. She just doesn't know what. That was the first moment I felt the balance shift. But Mara didn't retreat. She pivoted. Within days, I heard through the grapevine that she told neighbors I was running a covert operation on my property. One guy cornered me at the gas station, wide-eyed and curious. "Hey man, you really building something explosive out there?" I laughed. Yeah. A deck. Tyler spit his coffee when I told him. She's laying the groundwork, he said. Trying to get you labeled as a threat. That way she can escalate to law enforcement. And he was right. That's what desperate people do. They burn bridges. They escalate. And they make mistakes. I'd like to say I remained calm. That I drank coffee and watched the chaos like a Zen monk. But the truth is, I was livid. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was character assassination. A full-blown attempt to ruin a man because he stood in the way of a golf course and a glass lobby. I looked around my cabin, my beams, my stone hearth, the windows I installed with frozen fingers and a leveler in my teeth. All of it, under threat. For a view. Tyler saw me pacing and said, "It's okay to be angry. Just don't be reckless." I nodded. No promises. Before the week was out, Tyler made a call. "There's someone you need to meet," he said. "Old friend. Knows HOA law like scripture. Retired now, but has seen every dirty play in the book." I raised an eyebrow. "Who is he?" Tyler just smiled. "Let's just say he's not the kind of guy Mara wants showing up unannounced." And in that moment, something in me clicked. I stopped reacting like a victim. I started thinking like an engineer again. Tactical. Precise. Focused. If they wanted a paper war, fine. I drafted responses to every notice they'd ever sent. I cited line numbers from the Montana HOA Regulatory Act. I highlighted contradictions in their own bylaws. I copied in state officials, zoning boards, legal watchdogs. I sent copies to the local paper, just in case. Tyler called it controlled escalation. We'd stay inside the rules, but right on the edge. We even got creative. I started hosting nature workshops, fully legal, fully permitted. A few friends from town came out. We taught kids how to spot animal tracks. Held telescope nights. Did carpentry clinics on the weekends. Nothing disruptive. Nothing illegal. But the laughter, the lights, the visible joy? Mara couldn't stand it. The HOA fired back with more notices. A new inspector appeared, Mr. Dalton, laminated badge, measuring wheel, clipboard. He called himself a certified evaluator. Tyler looked him up in 10 minutes. No license. No registration. A ghost. Meanwhile, we laid traps, every visit, every email, every bogus fine logged and timestamped. Mara's next play was psychological. The HOA newsletter said I was potentially unstable. Patrols in golf carts rolled by at night. Cameras flashed from shrubbery. One woman crouched behind a tree with a DSLR. Tyler and I sat on the porch and watched like it was a nature documentary. "They're building a story," he said. "But guess what? So are we." And then Tyler mentioned his mentor, Sheriff Martinez. Retired. Sharp. Helped write the 2002 HOA abuse legislation. He's read the case file, Tyler said. I looked up. And? Tyler grinned. He's in. HOA reckoning, the final strike. And he's furious. That was all I needed to hear. Tyler didn't need to elaborate. If Mara thought we were done, if she believed her web of lies and manipulations had silenced us, she was going to learn a hard truth. You don't corner people like us and expect us not to bite back. But even knowing that, I couldn't ignore what the constant pressure was doing to me. I hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night in weeks. Not because I was afraid, no, fear left the building a long time ago. It was fury that kept me up. Rage so deep it buzzed through my veins like static electricity. My mind looped endlessly through inspection reports, legal jargon, construction blueprints, deadlines. Always calculating. Always preparing. I built this place. Legally. Every permit, every panel, every plank was accounted for. I maintained it meticulously. I didn't bother my neighbors. I didn't blast music or start fires or let my property become an eyesore. And yet, somehow, I was the one under siege. The target of some HOA crusade led by a woman who mistook a title for authority and personal vendetta for policy. Copper, my Shepherd Lab mix, stayed glued to me like a shadow. He sensed the change, the simmering tension that clung to my voice and sat on my shoulders like lead. He growled more these days, low, constant rumbles in his chest, especially when we walked the perimeter. Some nights he sat by the front door for hours, ears up, nose twitching. A sentry. A guardian. He didn't need to be trained, he just knew. I'd often join him, standing in the doorway like a soldier on watch. The air felt different now, like something was coming. Like we were holding position before the breach. Still, there was routine. A rhythm that grounded me in reality. Every morning, I walked the edge of the property, checking signs and boundary flags. I'd make coffee in the same dented percolator I'd used for years and sit at the edge of the deck, notebook open. Sometimes squirrels danced across the railing like none of it mattered. No letters, no votes, no threats. On those mornings, I felt invincible, like the woods had chosen me as their keeper, and no board resolution could change that. But other times, the quiet felt like a countdown. The pendulum never stopped swinging. It wore on me. That's when Tyler would step in, voice calm, posture steady. "This is chess, not dodgeball," he reminded me. "You don't just dodge their shots. You move your pieces, set your traps. Plan the checkmate." And so I did. I began watching the details. Not just the big moves, the little ones. Mara's letters, for example, started arriving earlier in the week, as if she were monitoring how fast I reacted. Random flyers began showing up in my mailbox about the dangers of old electrical systems in log homes. Concerned citizen tips, they called them. Even the trash service started skipping my pickup without explanation. Every inconvenience, every oversight, began to feel deliberate. Not just from Mara. From the whole machine. Tyler called it soft siege tactics. "They're isolating you," he said. "Making you doubt your stability. Because if they hit you with something big when you're tired, you're more likely to fold." Then the notice came. Certified mail. Signature required. The envelope was thick, 5 pages, and marked emergency enforcement action in bold red print like it had been rubber-stamped by a fire marshal. My stomach tightened as I flipped through it. According to the document, my home was now officially deemed a community safety hazard. Immediate evacuation was strongly recommended, and structural mitigation would begin within 72 hours. Attached was a newly dated inspection report, signed, unsurprisingly, by Mr. Dalton. The same man who'd shown up unannounced weeks ago with a clipboard and a smug grin. I could practically feel the ink drying on the paper. Tyler read the whole thing in silence. Then, calmly, he set it down and said, "She just detonated her own case." "What do you mean?" "This report's fake. Not just opinionated, fraudulent. And now she's linked herself to it. We've got her signature and his. That's game." That's when we stopped reacting and started preparing. I labeled a new folder, Final Strike. I didn't shout. I didn't confront. I gathered. I documented. I collected every permit, every certified inspection, every time-stamped interaction. Tyler reviewed the legal pathways. We even consulted an attorney friend over Zoom who specialized in HOA law. Quietly, professionally, we locked every piece of this into place. And then, I waited. I put on my boots, zipped up my jacket, and walked into that monthly HOA board meeting like I was headed into court. Because in a way, I was. The meeting was packed. More than usual. Word had spread. Tyler sat near the back, his presence calm but resolute. Copper waited in the truck. I stepped to the center aisle, a heavy binder in one hand and a silent promise in the other. Mara stood, resplendent in her tailored blazer, channeling all the drama of a state senator. She began her usual monologue. "The Moore property presents severe structural irregularities, potential fire hazards, and continued non-compliance with community safety protocols," she said, gesturing theatrically to her folder. "Therefore, we are invoking emergency procedures and voting to authorize immediate mitigation." I raised my hand. "May I respond?" She paused, reluctantly, but nodded. I walked to the front table, slowly, deliberately. I opened my binder and slid a document forward for the record. "This is a county-approved inspection report, dated last month. Full clearance. No hazards. No violations." I held up the next document. "This is a permit from the state. And this," I said, raising the last sheet, "is proof that Mr. Dalton, your emergency inspector, is not currently licensed to conduct independent structural evaluations. His report is void. His signature? Fraudulent." Gasps. Murmurs. A man in the third row muttered, "Wait, he has permits." Mara's fingers clenched around the table's edge like she could hold the whole illusion together by force. "Regardless of past approvals, this board is empowered to act for community protection. On the basis of forged documents." I asked calmly. "Unlicensed inspections?" "Mr. Dalton is also listed as a subcontractor for Thompson Builders, the same company that bid to rebuild the community center after your proposed demolition. Am I wrong?" Dead silence. One board member, an older woman, flipped through her binder like she just realized she'd signed off on something she hadn't fully read. Mara's voice sharpened. This is speculation. The board has discretion. I slid one final form across the table. Then I formally request that any action involving my property include law enforcement presence for documentation and liability purposes. She didn't read it. She signed it. Too fast. Too eager. She thought she was still in control. She didn't notice she had just agreed to place herself under a legal spotlight. Tyler exhaled behind me, quiet and satisfied. We didn't speak. We didn't linger. We walked out without another word. At the top of the stairs, Tyler leaned in and whispered, "She thinks this is over. She doesn't realize we just flipped the board." I smiled. Small. Measured. Controlled. Because I wasn't holding my breath anymore. I was holding the detonator. Underscore 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 underscore. 3 days later, I stood in front of the community center bulletin board, staring at the new HOA agenda posted in its plastic case. There it was, Item 6. Discussion and resolution regarding property code violation, Lot 12B, more residents. Tyler didn't need to say anything. We exchanged a look. We both knew this was the moment Mara would try to make it official. "You ready?" he asked. I tightened my grip on the folder. More than ready. The meeting room was full to the brim. I'd never seen so many people show up to a neighborhood event. Some looked curious. Others looked guilty. A few avoided eye contact altogether, not wanting to choose a side until the shouting started. Mara stood at the front table, surrounded by her usual 4 board members. She greeted the room like a pageant queen and opened with dramatic flair. Item 6, Emergency Resolution concerning the property located at Lot 12B. The structure has been deemed unsafe and non-compliant. She pulled out her infamous folder. We moved to classify the more residents as a class of structural threat. This includes risks of fire, collapse, and erosion. I stepped forward, silent, firm. "Credentials," I said to Dalton, who had stood beside her. He froze. I'm between certifications." "Transitional licensing phase," he mumbled. The room broke like a dam, whispers, shuffling, doubt sweeping across the audience like a cold wind. I opened my binder. Loudly. I read aloud the credentials of my official county inspector, the certification dates, the inspection clearance, and the fraud statutes that could apply to anyone presenting forged documents to a governing body. Mara cut in, voice sharp. "The board retains authority." "Not above state law," I replied. Then I dropped the hammer. "Mr. Dalton is tied to Thompson Builders. The same firm you've been advocating to replace the unsafe structures in the neighborhood. That's not coincidence. That's conflict of interest." A heavy silence. One board member lowered her hand. Then another. Mara panicked. "All in favor of enforcement for Lot 12B." Only 3 hands went up. 2 stayed down. The motion failed. The room erupted. Whispers became voices. Some angry. Some amused. Some stunned. I closed my binder. Checkmate. Just like that, they declared my property unsafe, fiction passed as fact, delivered with the finality of a gavel. I felt my pulse in my throat as I met Tyler's unmoving gaze. He radiated calm, sharp and deliberate as a hawk watching prey. Behind him, the other board members flinched like they knew the rug was about to be pulled from under them. Mara leaned forward. "Before we adjourn, one more detail I'd like confirmed on the record," I said, my voice quiet but firm. I stepped up, pulling a single-page document from my binder and laid it flat before her. The form spelled out my legal right to have a law enforcement observer present during any work conducted on my property, required for documentation and insurance. She looked at the paper without taking a breath or raising an eyebrow. I watched her sign it without hesitation or scrutiny. "Fine," she said with an annoyed shrug. "Makes no difference." And with that tiny gesture, a signature said more than her earlier words ever did. She pulled the pin. The countdown had officially begun. Tyler leaned forward in his seat as though studying a chessboard. He didn't give me a look. He didn't need to. We didn't drop our mic. We didn't shout anything. We just turned and walked out, like we'd come to drop off a repair estimate. Outside, the sun had dipped low, stretching long shadows across the sidewalk. I felt profound calm, not relief, not peace, exactly, more like the slow inhalation before diving into cold water. Tyler didn't smile. He simply said, "It's time." I nodded. "Call Martinez." The trap was set, sealed, and this time the hammer wouldn't fall on us. Gentleman turned soldier. Man turned fortress. I was ready. Underscore 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 underscore. Midnight vigil. That evening, I walked the perimeter of my property like it might vanish before dawn. I checked every camera, every no trespassing sign, every wire nailed into wood. Copper padded behind me, ears twitching like he could hear danger in the dark. One by one, I ticked them off. Dead center cam on the utility pole, check. Sheriff Martinez's new laminated notice staked in clear view, check. Entry sign on the porch reading property under law enforcement hold. Do not enter without written authorization. I thumbed the edges. It glowed under the porch light, as if daring Mara or her agents to miss it. I pocketed my keys, closed the cabin door behind us, and whispered, "Come take your shot, Mara. Let's see who ends up bleeding." Copper circled twice and settled at my feet. That night, I slept more than I had in weeks, shallow, but real. Underscore 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 underscore. Morning of the heavy steps. 2 mornings later, before dawn, I heard tires on gravel, deliberate, heavy, slow. Not Mara's golf cart patrols. Not that unmarked white SUV. This was something different, industrial tread, grown-up slowdown. Copper growled once and trotted down the path, then circled back, like he was delivering a message. A vehicle pulled into view. A man stepped out. He looked like a grizzled grandpa, silver hair, wireframe glasses, badge clipped to his chest. But his shoulders and stance spoke of someone who'd stood firm under far heavier storms than Mara Jensen could conjure. "You must be Eric," he said, extending a firm handshake. "And you must be the guy Tyler said gives HOA boards nightmares." I shook it. His grip was like granite. "Used to," he said. "Now I just hand out mirrors." Behind him, Tyler stepped out, unflinching and alert. We walked up to the porch and I handed him a bitter, black coffee, how I always brewed it. He took it without a nod, like this had been our routine the entire time. Tyler sat on the bench like it was a frontline briefing table. This wasn't a friendly catch-up. We'd come to plan. Underscore 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 underscore. Law enforcement takes the stage. Sheriff Martinez opened his folder and flipped carefully to the signed clause. He pointed, "This lets me file a full perimeter enforcement notice. That means your cabin is under temporary law enforcement protection. No one enters without process. Without me." He pulled out a fresh form and took the pen like he'd done this 1,000 times. I watched ink soak into paper like a fuse lighting. "That signature doesn't just change the law," Martinez said, hand firm. "It rewrites their illusion of control." He folded the form and slid it across my knee. Then he sipped the coffee, cold, metallic, unfazed, and said, "I've seen this play before. HOA boards that act like kings, drape pressure and procedure. They don't need you gone. They need you tired." I nodded. This matched every tactic Mara had used, the constant fines, the bogus inspections, the narrative warfare. "Well," Martinez continued, "time to tire them back." Underscore 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 underscore. Building the legal bulwark. For the next several hours, we transformed my property into a legal fortress. And Martinez pounded steel signs into the perimeter, state-enforced tamper warnings, big and bold. He installed motion-triggered cameras under eaves. Each one timestamped every motion, every rustle. He placed body camera recorders facing outward from window wells, and even bolted a lockbox into the floor, not cheap, not amateur. Tyler laid tripwire tactics, not the cliché kind, but strategic paperwork. Every camera placement, every notification, timestamped and logged. I dusted off my surveying gear, the laser stakes, grade markers from the Denver job, tools I hadn't handled in 6 years. I set boundary lines visible from the road. Land wasn't just owned, it was charted. Together, we repurposed our memories, tools, and routines into something fierce and unassailable. And every action drew deeper lines in the sand for her to cross. Underscore 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 underscore. The pre-dawn briefing. That night, Martinez paced the porch under a silver moon. Inside, the cabin held that distant hush of readiness. He explained the play. They'll come soft at first, a knock, a clipboard, questions. Maybe a contractor with a measuring wheel. The second they touch anything structural, a wall, a beam, a nail, they violate enforcement hold. Felony interference. Combined with impersonating an inspector, forging documents? We're talking serious charges. One touch. One mistake, they're in deeper than they suspect. A single parked motion sensor camera blinked red inside, steady as a heartbeat. Do you think they'll do it? I asked quietly. Absolutely. He didn't hesitate. Mara always overreaches. She thinks signatures don't count, until the sheriff's name is on them. I lay down on the porch floor with Copper's head in my lap and listened to birds hoot that felt like thunder. He left for the night. I stayed awake, chest against my central beam, the one I'd skewed, cussing, when I framed it. I could still feel the scar on my thumb where a splinter had sliced deep. I touched it now. Memory hardened into matter. We built this cabin with our hands and hearts. Mara saw it as a barrier. I saw it as home, and haven, and testament. Underscore 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 underscore. First true rest. I slept better than I had in months. Not deep, but firm. Copper curled at the foot of my bed. No more pacing. No more growls at the wind. Just steady breathing. When I woke, there was morning light. And birds. The real kind, not the quiet before the storm. For a brief, glorious moment, I remembered what waking without fear felt like. It was short, but real. Underscore 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 underscore. The warning poster. That afternoon, Martinez returned, poster under his arm. Time to make it plain, he said, laying it on the porch table. When he unrolled it, it rippled like evidence in giant color. In large font was the enforcement clause, signature and sheriff seal. Highlighted lines, bolded text, date stamped. It looked official. Commanding. This goes inside, Martinez said. Next to your permits, the fire marshal's report, all of it. Let them read it. Let them feel the moment they overstepped. I stared. You're turning my living room into a legal museum. He shrugged. No, he said. Not a museum. A warning sign. Inside, we hung the poster in a gold-toned frame, legal declaration art. We laid it beside state permits, engineer inspection stamps, zoning maps. Below it, Tyler affixed a blinking red sensor light. A steady pulse. Visual. Auditory. Legal presence. Then came the hardest part, we left Copper inside. Let him feel safe in his castle. Underscore 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 underscore. And that's where we stand now. Pieces set, defenses strong, the legal war humming somewhere just outside the cabin walls. No one knows what tomorrow brings. Mara, her board, possible contractors, lawyers. But inside this wooden shell, we're waiting. Warm coffee, load-bearing beams, legal statute memoized, the sheriff's signature waiting for someone to cross the threshold. Because all it takes is one step, one touch, one demand ignored, and the fuse we lit will burn fast. And that's when this killer view becomes more than a slope and a skyline. It becomes a story worth fighting for, and winning. Underscore 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 underscore. He wasn't alone, not exactly. The cabin had everything he needed: food, fresh water, solar power, a backup generator, even airflow strategically piped in through vented windows. But Tyler wasn't used to confinement. He was a man who thrived on wide skies, on hiking to the ridge to greet the sunrise, on hearing nothing but wind in the trees. Now he sat inside a cabin that felt like both shelter and snare, held in by a strategy that Martinez insisted would pay off. It wasn't cruelty. It was documentation. If they break in now, Martinez had said, it's not ignorance. It's intent. And that's what we need. A willful violation of a standing order. Stronger case. Unshakable. I'd hesitated. He'll be scared. He's not used to this kind of thing. Martinez hadn't flinched. So are victims, he replied, his voice low and resolute. But sometimes, they bite back. There was no real argument to make against that. We weren't hoping for harm, but the law, like any real truth, needed to be tested under pressure. If they crossed the line after the warnings, the notices, the laminated county order taped to the window, then it wouldn't just be unethical. It would be criminal. And that's where reckoning starts. I closed the door behind Tyler and tried not to imagine the worst. Tried not to picture the moment when Copper, his loyal dog, barked, and no one stopped. But this was the game now. Not cat and mouse. Not resistance. Strategy. Pressure and proof. Before the last light faded from the sky, we walked the trail behind the cabin one final time. The pine trees whispered, their shadows stretched across the golden ground like long, reluctant goodbyes. I looked down into the valley where the creek curled like a ribbon, and up at the ridge beyond where sunlight touched the tips of trees in orange fire. This wasn't just land. This wasn't just lumber. This was a story. And stories don't go quietly. If they wanted to bulldoze this chapter out of the book, they were going to have to tear through every line. Every nail. Every permit. Every legal clause Tyler and I had stapled to the frame. This place wasn't a shack. It was a witness. Back inside, Tyler handed me a sticky note and a pen. Write something, he said. Something they'll see first. Before they panic. Before they think they're in charge. I didn't hesitate. I wrote the sentence I'd carried in my chest like a pulse for weeks. We taped it right under the framed clause, the one with the sheriff's badge, the one Mara had once laughed at. Martinez leaned in, read the 7 crooked words, and gave the faintest nod. That's not a warning, he said. That's a reckoning. The sentence read, sometimes a man's silence is the loudest sound in the room. As night slid over the mountain like a closing curtain, I sat out on the porch one last time. The forest was still, no wind. The stars came out early, like they knew they had front row seats to something inevitable. The cabin behind me felt loaded, not with weapons, but with documentation, with truth stacked like bricks, impossible to move without consequence. The ridge below waited. I wondered what it would look like by morning, untouched or broken. They would come. Of course they would. Cameras, clipboards, crowbars. But they wouldn't find what they expected. They'd walk in thinking they were winning, and they'd leave realizing they'd already lost. At 7 a.m. sharp, I crouched behind the fence line draped in camouflage, blending with the tree bark and moss. Tyler lay prone beside me, his binoculars steady. Sheriff Martinez stood calmly behind us, arms crossed, wearing the quiet patience of a man who had seen every kind of betrayal, and knew exactly what to do about it. Every camera was rolling. Every document had already been mailed, registered, and laminated in triplicate. Inside, Copper was silent. Alert. Not a single bark unless provoked. Then we heard it, gravel crunching. Tires on the trail. 3 white SUVs pulled up like a caravan of entitlement. One had a trailer loaded with tools. Mara stepped out first, clipboard in hand, chin high like a queen surveying a kingdom. Dalton followed, smug and squinting. 2 board members stepped behind them, and 3 men in work boots started unloading tools like demolition was a foregone conclusion. No knock. No announcement. Just boots on the porch and a finger pointing at the siding like it was already rubble. Mara's voice sliced the morning quiet. "Begin here," she snapped. A crowbar hit the siding. Crack. Then another. Crack. The men tore into the wall like they were gutting a condemned house, unaware of the blinking red light above them, the surveillance camera capturing every second. He was ordered to evacuate, Mara barked. He violated the emergency order. Get him out. Call the sheriff. She didn't know the sheriff was already here. This structure is compromised, Dalton echoed. We need to extract the occupant inside. Copper barked, once, sharp and loud, but no one paused. Not one person stopped to wonder why laminated permits were posted in every window. Why a sign nailed to the porch beam didn't look like something printed at Kinko's. They were too far in. Too committed to the story they'd sold themselves. Too confident to notice they were walking into a legal ambush. Then someone shined a flashlight through the window and froze. It wasn't just surprise. It was the kind of paralysis that sets in when reality doesn't line up with expectation, and that dissonance punches you in the gut. Inside the cabin, under the full light of day, sat 3 things they hadn't prepared for. 1. A sign reading Property Under Law Enforcement Hold, County Order M 2024-187. 2. A full foam board display of every building permit. 3. An enlarged and highlighted copy of Mara's own signed statement. From the trees, Sheriff Martinez stepped forward, hat tipped back, face unreadable. The way a real sheriff moves when the truth finally catches up with the lie. "Ms. Jensen," he called out, voice like leveled gravel, "I believe you and your crew are in violation of County Law Enforcement Hold Order 2024-1847. They turned. Some stared. Others blinked like they hadn't even considered this possibility. I didn't move. I wanted the camera to see it, the contrast between power assumed and power earned. Martinez advanced slowly, methodically. He handed a folder to his deputy, timestamps, signed orders, screenshots. Her signature. Her authorization. Every step covered. "This isn't just trespass," he said. "This is obstruction. Property damage. Collusion with an unlicensed individual posing as a state inspector." Dalton opened his mouth, then shut it when the sheriff's badge rose to meet his eyes. "They so much as touch another splinter," Martinez continued, "and we press criminal." The workers, suddenly uncertain, started stepping back. One quietly placed his crowbar back on the trailer like it might clear his name. Inside the cabin, every inch spoke for itself, from the pinned business card under the county seal to the video timestamp rolling in the corner. This wasn't ambiguity. It was a legal ambush with receipts. Tyler stood beside me, steady as a tripod. Deputies took statements. Documented tools. Every nail pulled was noted. Every board scratched was logged. It felt like watching wolves realize the meat was poisoned, and they just swallowed the bait. Mara had walked in thinking I was gone. That's why they came so early. She thought this was cleanup. That it was over. But it never was. Not for me. Martinez addressed the group once more. "You tore open a structure under active hold. On record. On camera. And under your own leadership." He pointed at the laminated sheet inside. "Her signature. Your tools. That's documentation. You'll want an attorney." For the first time, Mara didn't argue. She didn't flinch. She just looked down, not to recover, but to avoid the weight now descending on her shoulders. The board members drifted toward their vehicles, faces pale. No speech would save them now. I stepped forward just enough to meet Mara's eyes. "You didn't care about codes," I said. "You cared about the view. And now the whole town sees it." Tyler handed the deputy a transcript of her recorded words. "Once it's gone, the resort can proceed." No denial. But her hands clenched. White-knuckled. Trembling. Dalton tried to slip away, but Martinez summoned him back for questioning. This wasn't a takedown. It was a turning point. And no one had brought enough armor for what followed. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't angry. I was steady. I had built this moment like I'd built the cabin, with patience, precision, and truth no one could unmake. Tyler walked past me, nodding once as the last deputy took inventory. And behind me, the wall they tried to destroy stood tall, a scar now, yes. But a scar with a story. And we weren't done telling it. When the last nail sank into the cabin's new wall, I didn't feel triumph. Just stillness. The kind that comes not after a battle cry, but after surviving something meant to silence you. Sheriff Martinez had just finished escorting Marla Jensen, the HOA tyrant who once ruled our neighborhood like a petty queen, into a patrol car. Her face wasn't angry. It wasn't even proud. It was hollow. As if she realized her empire had turned to ash and she'd signed the matchbook herself. I stood next to the gash in my wall, still raw from the last time her people trespassed. This is the last scar they'll ever leave on my land, I thought. Sheriff Martinez looked at me as he closed the door gently, like he'd done this before. Next stop's the DA's office, he said. I nodded, my silence louder than any words. I'd be there, with everything. Every paper, every timestamp, every recording we'd collected like armor. Once the report was filed, things moved fast. Within 2 weeks, the county prosecutor had enough to press 4 charges: bribery, falsified inspections, property damage, and conspiracy to coerce a land surrender. Marla Jensen wasn't the only name on the docket. Mr. Dalton, the so-called inspector who'd shown up with fake credentials and a clipboard full of threats, was under investigation for impersonation and falsifying reports. The case didn't unfold, it shattered. Like someone dropped a glass house from 10 stories up. And the neighborhood? They saw. They heard. They finally believed. The HOA board wasn't immune, either. 2 members were formally censured for negligence and conflict of interest, rubber-stamping emergency orders without review. 1 resigned before the ink even dried. The county launched a full external audit of the HOA. Now, no decision could be made without passing through a court-appointed administrator. Transparency wasn't a courtesy anymore, it was law. Marla would have hated it. Gone were the days of secret votes and vague fines for mailbox height or unauthorized vegetation. Now, every landscaping approval, every noise complaint, had to go through a formal review. Oversight replaced fear. Accountability replaced intimidation. I didn't throw a celebration. I didn't throw a middle finger either. But people noticed. The same neighbors who once avoided eye contact now gave me quiet nods, like I'd fought a boxing match they didn't realize we were all in. A man I barely knew dropped off a bundle of firewood. Another slow clapped at the post office, eyes wide with something between awe and apology. A few admitted they'd seen the signs but hadn't known what to do. I thought it was just Marla being Marla, one said, shame on his breath. I understood. I'd thought the same, until it was my wall, my land, my freedom. One morning, I stepped out and found a pie on my porch. Still warm. Apple. No note, no plate, just a paper towel folded underneath. It wasn't a bribe or pity. It was acknowledgement. Someone had seen, understood. I carried it inside like it was a newborn, set it on the counter, and didn't touch it for hours. I just let it sit there, filling the cabin with the quiet aroma of closure. When I finally cut into it, it tasted like apology and respect baked together. That moment sealed it. I hadn't just won. I'd created something that could help others win too. Tyler and I, we took every piece of documentation, every code citation, every complaint letter, every trick Marla used, and built a guide. No names, no glory. Just plain, step-by-step advice: how to record legally, how to respond to false inspections, how to file enforcement holds. And we included the most powerful weapon of all, Clause C, Line 17, the paragraph that gave Sheriff Martinez the legal authority to intervene. We posted it anonymously on community forums and neighborhood boards. Within days, the messages poured in. Is this legit? Can I use this in Michigan? You just saved my house. That's when I realized, it wasn't just my fight anymore. The guide began spreading quietly. Shared in private Facebook groups. Printed out at public libraries. Whispered about at town halls. Mailed between elderly residents who were tired of being bullied over paint shades and garden gnomes. It didn't need a logo or a name. People knew. Justice doesn't always arrive in a black robe. Sometimes it comes in 12-point Times New Roman with bullet points and citations. I used to think distance protected you. That if you lived far enough out, past the last gas station, past the last paved road, you were safe from small-time power plays. I was wrong. Paper travels. Petty power has legs. And if you're not ready for it, it'll knock your door down with a smile and a clipboard. But now? Now I was ready. I didn't want another fight. But if one came, I'd know what to file, who to call, what to document. Not out of vengeance, out of wisdom. Because I knew what happens when you pretend there isn't a war at your doorstep. Marina Taylor was elected as the new HOA president. First thing she did was show up at my door with black coffee in a thermos and a notebook filled with notes on drainage, fire breaks, and fixing the lake benches. "No more color code drama," she said. "We're focusing on things that matter." I liked her immediately. She asked if I'd consider joining the advisory committee. I politely declined. Told her I'd rather build birdhouses than cast votes. But I added, "If anything shady happens, you can call me. I keep receipts." She laughed. She understood. The cabin wall was rebuilt within a week, stronger this time. Better insulation. Reinforced lumber. I even added a porch extension. Nothing fancy, just enough room for a second chair and a bigger table. The kind of space meant for peace. The damage they tried to do wasn't erased. I let the memory stay, etched into the new boards, buried in the slow rhythm of nails driven by hand. Because peace doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from building over, not around. Inside, near the front door, I hung a frame. Not a photo. Not a certificate. Just one sheet of paper. The original HOA order. Clause C highlighted. Marla's signature clearly visible. Timestamp bold and sharp. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. That paragraph changed everything. It was the difference between a wrecking crew and a sheriff. Between silence and survival. And someday, if someone walks into my home and asks how I saved it, I'll point to that frame and say, that paragraph. That's what did it. Marla didn't fight the charges. She took a plea, accepted a lifetime ban from any housing authority role in the state. The last time I saw her, she was bagging groceries at the corner store. Her name tag was crooked. Her eyes were empty. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. There was no hate in my chest, just finality. Some people rebuild after losing everything. Others shrink. She was the latter. Her whole identity had been built on control. Once that was gone, there was nothing underneath. Just a clipboard and silence. Me? I had my land. My dog. And something she never understood, neighbors who showed up. Copper still naps on the porch every afternoon. The forest is quiet again. But this time, it's not the silence of fear. It's the kind you earn. The kind that hums low in your bones when you know what's yours, and you know you've defended it. I watch the seasons shift in full color now, no one breathing down my neck about paint samples or pine needles. Not everyone gets this ending. Some stories never reach the courtroom. Some never even reach the sheriff's desk. But mine did. And that matters. Justice is slow. But when it moves like gravity, not loud, not flashy, just inevitable. Sheriff Martinez once told me, good people don't always know how to fight until the fight finds them. He was right. I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted my porch, my coffee, and my dog. But when the storm came, I didn't fold. I stood up. I held the line. And somehow, that was enough. The end.